Good morning. My name is John Hazlip and I am with Central Office's Surveying and Mapping. This is the third in a three-part webinar series on Bentley's Open Roads Technology Civil Survey for the FDOTSS3 SS4 Design Survey Workflow. In this webinar, I will be continuing where we left off last time with a little more editing of the survey terrain model. Also, due to many questions, I will slightly deviate from the original agenda and show some techniques for making survey database selections. I will also get into the featurizing of graphical data and then conclude with some information on the SURVRD file and other deliverables. We're going to look first at DTM existing element templates. I'm going to add a chain. I'm going to show you types of break lines, and we'll edit some triangles. And remember to use the F6 to release any commands that have been entered into using the civil models. If you remember from our last webinar, we had a sample project and had built a terrain. So I wanted to talk a minute about the existing DTM template. And what the existing template is, it's a way to apply feature definitions. If you go up to your element selection in MicroStation and drop down and open element templates, we can look at what has been loaded for this particular drawing. When we created a terrain model and applied a feature definition of DTM existing, it added this DTM existing template to the folder structure. And what we can do is, if we need to do some adjustments, changes to the default selections and the default visualizations of the terrain model, we can do it right here in the existing element template. In many cases, we'll want to have this off, but you can see we've got contours off right up here. We've got triangles off. The vertices and flow areas, the low points, high points, obviously should be off. But in many cases, especially when we're editing the triangles, we'll want to have these on. Now, if we have these off, every time we try to do an edit, and any time it updates and MicroStation or Civil Survey is actually processing continuously, it will look at this template and it will turn off the triangles after any kind of action or event. So what we want to do is we're going to turn these triangles in the element template to on. So the default, you can use the drop down off on, or you can just double click right next to the triangles off on display and it'll turn it on. So once it's on, I'll go ahead and close this, and we can see that we're looking at the triangulation that we had done last time. What I want to do is show you how to add a chain to this particular database. So just for the second, for visualization, I'm going to go in, I'm going to select the, and I'm going to have to stop for just a second and switch menu configurations. I'm going to be showing you right of way at the very end, so actually that's where I was right at the moment. Okay, we're good. And just a note that that happens a lot. We actually get those questions. People have issues and they don't realize that they're in one configuration or another. And just to follow up with that, remember to have the include survey features activated. Anyway, so I'm going to select the element, which is actually the terrain model itself, and I'll control whether it's on or off from the element information or properties box. And what I'm going to do is add a chain. We looked last time at the survey field books. Here it is. And if we want to add a linear feature or a chain, I'm going to right click on all linear features and say new. And if you remember from chain editing, this is a pretty simple process. I want to put a chain at the base of this retention wall. Now I could type in the RET. If I hover over the RETW12, I can just say RETW12 and then go on to the next one. But it's much easier just to hit the icon right here and go to your next point and select it. You don't have to select in the center, just to select the feature point anywhere and click on the screen. So what it's done here, let me go back to this one. and then RE12 to 15. Let me select the next one. Just go down the list, hit the icon and select, hit the icon, select, hit the icon and select, and the very last one. And once we have all the chain points listed, I'll say accept, and what we're going to have, if I use my selector and look at it, in the properties dialog box, we now have a linear feature. It's on the default level, and it has no feature definition. That's the reason it's on the default level. So what I want to do is I just want to make this also a retaining wall. So I'll say RETW as the feature definition, and zone. I could add the zone also at that point. Zone 1 is fine. That's what it was. But also note when I reselect it that the terrain model attribute right here says determined by feature definition. Well, all the feature definitions, if you remember before, are set to none, and only when a crew gives it a G or ground shot will the terrain model automatically go to a spot shot for points or break lines for chains. So what I want to do is I want to change this to a break line. Okay, once I've done that, it should be added into the terrain model. So I turn my triangles on. You'll see it actually is triangulating along the bottom of that wall. I also want to talk a little bit about types of break lines. So I'm going to turn these chains off and mention we have a few different features in here that need to be looked at. One is this building. This is just a sample, but in many cases you'll have complete building chains, and if they're closed, which they probably should be one way or another, we can change the break line to something else. And it really, what it is, it should be a break void. So if you read in Bentley's glossary of definitions, a break void is used essentially for a building or an area that you want to break the triangulation. However, you don't want it to be a hole. What will happen if you make it a hole, which is down here at the bottom, is if you merge two terrain models, the hole will be filled in by the second terrain model essentially. But by making it a break void, what it does is it doesn't triangulate across it, but it keeps it a void. Okay? And notice that the triangles came out automatically because what I did was I went into the element template, remember, and I changed that element template triangles to automatically come on anytime we do an event. Okay, we'll turn them off one more time, and I want to look at these slope lines. The slope lines are also, in this case, they come in as a break line. They did that automatically when brought over from Casey because they had a G attribute or a ground attribute. The Power G pack doesn't know exactly what kind of break line it's going to be, so it's always going to come in just as a break line. So you have to manually change these. So a slope is really a soft break line. You want your contours not to turn sharply along this break line like a pavement edge. You want them to turn in a smooth pattern. So we'll make this a soft break line. Also, we could have done both of them at the same time. I have another one here, and it's also going to be a soft break line. So as you see, I want to talk a little bit about these types of break lines. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to show you editing these triangles. Once you have all your features set, your break lines set properly, you may want to recreate your surface if you have problems. What I have seen in the past is during certain functions, sometimes your break voids will get lost and you'll have to come back and recreate your terrain model. But it's not a problem because it's constantly processing, and it's easy to recreate it once you have all your features set properly, your spot shots, your ground attributes, and your break line set. So we have a tool for editing, and if I look under my task menu and look at terrain models, we have, if you look right along here, it's edit terrain model, and if I pick this and I want to edit a triangle and I look at it, note that your contextual box that's always up in MicroStation has changed. It's actually changed to edit terrain models. So we have a lot of possibilities right here. But when I go to edit a terrain model, for instance, if I pick delete an edge triangle, and here's an edge triangle, and I look at it, it says not an editable terrain. The reason for that is Open Road Survey is constantly processing. So what I need to do is I need to look back at my Project Explorer and go all the way up to right up just ahead of my field books and right click, and you'll see a command for deactivating the surveying processing rules. Now you can turn these on and turn these off. So for right now I'm going to turn it off because I want to edit this terrain model. It puts a little lot next to the category right here, and what that means is it hasn't locked the terrain, it has only turned off the processing. So now when I select my edit terrain model and I want to delete an edge triangle, it works. See, so I can edit. Another tool is deleting a vertex. So if I want to delete a vertex, something I believe should not be in, what it'll do is you select the terrain model first, and then you see a little dot. You just click on the screen. It'll delete that vertex. Okay. We also have swap lines, which we do. See, just select them. They'll swap. We can insert a vertex. So I could go back to, say, this point that I selected before and add a vertex back in. We can move a vertex. So if we have I want to show you, I'm going to go back to that in just a second. And then we've got delete triangles by lines. Right at the moment this is only working along the edges, but if I select the terrain model and then put a line anywhere along the edges like this, for instance, it will delete triangles. What I wanted to show you was on move and inserting vertexes. We also can edit along walls. Now what you see here is it's kind of hard unless you're noticing. You see the triangle goes to the top of the wall right here. So I want to use my edit triangle. Use my selector, edit. And in this case, I'll insert a vertex and I'll select the terrain model and maybe somewhere about halfway down this wall. So you can see I can actually add in triangles. If I want to move a vertex, select it, and then you can move it to different points. What I'd have to do is delete one first. So you can't move it to where there already is a vertex, and that's the issue I was running to just a moment ago. So what I need to do is delete a vertex like this one, for instance. And then if I need to move a vertex, I can move it down to a point feature. Okay, so what you see then is a little better, and of course then I need to add another vertex in right here. And what you see is not quite what you want to do, but in this case it kind of worked out. So that is how you use your edit terrain model tools. Once you've got your terrain in the condition you want it, you can lock the terrain. So I could select it and look in your element information box. And if I look along here under extended, I've got my terrain unlocked. I can lock it this way. And that's probably the way you want to do it. So we've added the triangles, and also remember to use your F6 if you need to release from a command. The other thing we had a lot of questions on was different ways of making selections for cleaning up your data. So let me go back to MicroStation, and I'm going to open another file. Let's make this one let's open this one right here. This is one of the raw files I opened last time and did a little teeny bit of cleanup on it, but I want to show you a little bit more of things we can do for cleaning up a file. If you remember from last time, the exclamation marks mean that there's a warning that there's a problem, usually a feature definition issue. And if I go to the Survey tab and expand field books and look at all point features, what I'll do is, remember the red means that it could not find a point feature definition that met. Now there's only one red one in the entire list, and it's this A. So if we look and turn everything off, in fact I'm just going to turn everything off and turn on just those A's points and zoom to them, and what I've got, it looks like I've got 3 points here. If I zoom up on them, they're VVH, or verified vertical and horizontal utilities. In this case, a 6-inch water line, and what this denotes is that these are holes that have been dug to expose the water line at these points. So these are QLA points. You could put them in as test holes, but they actually located a water line, and so we need to make these QLA points on the water lines, so the designers will know at these points this is an exact elevation. Now the A is not in our definitions, it's actually QLA, quality level A. So there's a few different things we can do. If we highlight this, and what I want to do is to show you how to make selections from the database itself. If you highlight any category and you go to your taskbar, go to your survey processing, and look at your show details, this box will show up. It also can be docked. I'll just lower it kind of down here a little bit so we can look at it. There are some things we could do. We can highlight this and we can change the feature definition to QLA. And you saw it disappeared. The reason it disappeared is we only have the A points highlighted in the Project Explorer, remember? Now you will see a QLA. I can put it back, turn it on as a QLA, and you'll see it as a QLA point if I highlight it or select it. Oops. Let me go back and turn this back on. QLA. And I note that it's not case sensitive, so either way I'll do. So in this case, I'm going to use my selector and select it over here just so you can see what it looks like in the point feature definitions in the properties box. So now we have a feature definition of QLA, and it is in zone 3, which is what we want. Okay. There's also, we could select these by selecting them both, and then over in this, if we hover over in this area just left of the name and right click, we can edit all of the selected items at once. In this case, I want the feature definition, and I'll put QLA in and press the little green button to accept. And what you notice now is there is no, up here at the top, there is now no QLA category. But if I zoom out, you'll see, if you have to turn them off and turn them all back on, you'll see all three of them. Okay, that's one way to do it with selections. I want to look at some more points though. In this case, I want to look at all the points. So right now I have all points highlighted in my details. And notice how in my details dialog box it changed and it showed all my points. Okay, I can sort these by right clicking on the name. I'll say sort ascending, and what you're going to see is all the points. Now in this case we have, starting with A1 and going through A23, we have primary, secondary control. Well, primary, secondary control should not be on zone 1. If you're not sure what zone they are, open the survey filters right here, and you'll see that primary and secondary control points, the points themselves, should be on zone 5. So I can highlight all of them, hold my shift down and get them all. You could also exclude one by holding the control, just like any kind of, or another by holding like any other Microsoft functionality. So I'll put them back in here. Okay. And I could right click and say edit selected items and go to zone, but there's another way. I want to show you, you can actually select them. So if you look at selection, and you actually have to have the select element selector. See over here or in your task, you need to have that element selector selected when you do this. If you right click and say selection and say create selection set, okay, it should create a selection set. I don't see a selection set, and I'm not quite sure why. There should be. Let me do this. Let me go back one more time, go to my all points, probably have them all selected. Show details. Okay, make sure my selector is selected. Select everybody. Right click. Selection. Create selection set. Yeah, that's it. So note that when you use that, you want to have them visualized. If they're off the screen, it doesn't want to do it. Anyway, so now what I've got is I've got some cells. I've got 23 cells, and I can change the feature definitions, the zones, etc. right here. I can do them all in a very convenient manner. So I'm going to change this to zone 5, tab out, and what you'll see is now is all these A points have changed to zone 5. So if I just lower that for the moment and go to Project Explorer, close everybody out. In fact, I want to turn off everything. We lower this and turn on just my zone 5 filter points. You'll see they're still selected. I can unselect them. Now you're showing just your control, your primary and secondary control. So this is a cleaning technique, and you really need to know this. There's one other technique I want to show you on cleaning that I didn't cover last time around. That's important to know. If I turn everything off and I go over to my civil standards, I did show you that you can turn on categories based on the survey display folders. And in this case, what I'm thinking about is drainage. We have a lot of drainage in this. If I turn them on, you'll see, so zoom in here and hover on it, you'll see this is a concrete spillway. Now what you don't see though are just the drainage points. In fact, this entire database needs cleaning up. So what we've got is, if I go in and I go over to survey, let me turn this back off for a moment, and I go over to survey and I look at zone 2 drainage points and zone 2 drainage chains, I'm going to say, oh my goodness, this was done on a different standard. So we've got all these bridge elements here. These all should be in zone 4. I can select these and go over to the cells, change those to zone 4. And any chains, that's already in zone 4. The complex is zone 4. There's one other linear feature, looks like a handrail right here. That's what it is. This also should be in zone 4. as I turn these off and then turn back on the zone 2 points and chains, okay, you still see plenty that needs to be cleaned up and can easily be done, but that's not what I wanted to get at. What I wanted to get at was that you don't see any zone 2 points. So if we're going to start cleaning up the zones, we can. What you just saw was one way to do it. Go ahead and move what you can out of this zone to its proper zone, get it cleaned up. But then go back and turn everything off. Go back to your civil modules. Turn on your drainage, and then go back to your survey display. Why just the drainage to select, and I'm going to select. Actually, I'm not going to select a filter. I'm going to go up to the field books, and I want to select all the default points. These are all the points. These are the problem points because they don't have a feature definition, and they're not given a feature in the field when they're surveyed. If I turn them all on, what you're going to see is we get all the default points, and most all of these, if I select any one and look at it over here, it's going to be on probably zone 1. You just select the point itself. Yeah, and you see, pretty much everything's in up zone 1. If I look right here around my spillway, I see I do have these zone points, these L flow line U8. So these points, these LFL U8s, kind of remember that, are pretty consistent. This crew was very consistent the way they named them, which is what we want to do, and the way we've trained our crews. Okay, so what we need to do is get these LFLUs. If we move down and look, we have some other stuff going on here. These are all LFLUs points. These are all flume points, spillway points. We've also got, looks like we have a mitered in section here. So, okay, let's see and those are LMES. So what we can do is we can select these from our points. So if I turn on, and I'll just turn on all points again, and show my details, which I actually already have up. So they're selected from earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and find those LFLUs. So this is about the only way that you can select a range of points, but it does work. So if I go down, let's see, there's the LF. I just saw LFs right there. So now these, I'm not sure if these, I'd have to look, but these might be flow lines along curb and gutter, so I'm not sure. I want to check those first, but I know those LFLUs are all spillway points. So I'll take all the LFUs points and select them all, right click, and say create selection set, and I've got 60 cells, and I'm going to change those to zone 2. And also, what was the other one? LMES. Now see, here's some ground points. I know all of these should have, just right off the top of my head, this is something that's easy to fix. Got what, 100, LGND 100. Right click, create selection set, and if I look at these cells, they're all feature definitions default. These should not be default. They should be GND. That zone is good, but their feature definition was not correct. It was set to default. It should be ground. Okay, these are ground shots for DTM densification. The other one I was looking for that I just noticed, which is zone 2, was LMES for mitered in section. Here's some LMES. And as this crew went through and did segments, they did a lot of MES. So we could set up a filter to find all the MESs, would probably be a little more efficient, but in many cases you can't tell from that. So I'm going to create a selection set, and our feature definitions continue to be default, which is a cell, and by the way, in this case, it's a survey point cross. And I'm going to change this to zone 2. There you go. And so noticed all the LMS that are zone 2. Okay, I think I'll just select one for the moment. and lower this, and what you see, yeah, see there's the point that I had actually selected. So what I can do now is I'll turn everything off, go back to my civil standards, turn on just the drainage existing, go back to survey, in my filters, my zone filters, turn on just the drainage points, and now what you see is you've got your drainage points in the correct zone. So the designer can actually go in and just turn on drainage and look at points if he needs to see an elevation at any specific spot, he or she, when they're working on their design, and that is very frequent. So hopefully this will avoid them coming back to the surveyor and asking for particular station offset to a spillway or a pipe culvert, and please give me the elevations at this point and this point and this point. They have it. Okay, it's easy for them to just select and look. Okay, that pretty much covers what I wanted to show you on selection sets. One other thing I wanted to mention, and I'll do this real quickly, I won't go through any changes. I wanted to show you that this is the same project in its raw form brought in, but I did a little something this time when I actually brought it in from Casey. Instead of just saying combining segments, I actually said separate segments. So if you look at your data files, you'll see every segment is represented. All right. So if I want to turn everything off and look at a particular segment, say segment L, for instance, I can look at only one segment at a time. Segment M. See, so this may be even a more efficient way to do your cleanup, is selecting one segment at a time and going through it. And it probably will, if you're coming in from EFB, you're going to be probably bringing in one segment at a time, and that's the way to do it. But from a Casey database, this also would be a good way to do it. So we've looked at changing properties from details. We've looked at using the feature definition plus the field book to visualize, select, and then edit. And we've looked at separate segments. I want to talk about another thing that's very important, and that's featurizing graphical data. I'm going to go to and open up another file. In this case, if you're extracting from LiDAR, or if you're aerial photographer and you're extracting break lines and particular points, you're not going to end up with a field book like this. You're going to end up with graphical data, just like the way you always did and the way we always used it. But in this case, what I want to do is open up, this is the sample file, but this is a little bit different than their earlier sample file we looked in. The earlier one I brought in from Casey. This particular sample file I brought in from the CDG converter, so it's just graphical elements. If I look at this, if I select it, it's just a line string. If I hover on it like this, you'll see it's baseline, survey control, we have telephone bird, but all it gives me is a line string and a level. If I hover on a point like this monument, it's a cell, a CMON cell, and here is a ground point. If you're doing extraction, you may want to just hit some ground shots. So here's a ground point. It's a cell is G and D. It's ground shots. So how do you get this into the field book? Well, it's pretty easy to do. We want to create a field book to begin with. So I'm going to say new. And we have a new field book. We also can change the name of that field book. I'm going to say how about graphics? Okay, so now we have a field book for just graphics. There's nothing in it. There's no data files. But if we right-click on the graphics and say load, we can load features from current graphics. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it didn't take long. It only took a second. And now what we have, if I hover on the same monument, now we have much more. We have CMON It's got zone 1. It doesn't know what zone to put it in, so everything's going to go into zone 1. It doesn't know what terrain model attribute to put on it, so it's going to say determined by feature definition. As we know, those are all off. Okay, so if I look at this point, now it's a ground point, and it's actually given a name. It automatically gave it a GND_70. That's the name. And if I expand my points and look at them, you can see that all the points have been placed in here. Now what Bentley does, there's one thing you do need to be aware of, and Bentley does this and for a good reason. In this case, it does something called apply best match feature definition. And in this case, we don't have a beacon, a BN out here. If I select it, what you're going to see, if I turn everything off and just select just the beacon, you see the text that was there was not. You see what happens? It's not a. If I select it, it's actually the cell name's antenna. So for some reason, the feature definition got put in as BN. I think it does a really good job, but there's a couple of cases where it just has a problem. So that's something you want to know. You want to note. And you want to be careful, do not do a survey redraw until you've fixed all your features, or it would have turned this into a beacon. See, if I hit tab, go through this, it should be, now it's an antenna. Now the name didn't change, it's still BN is the name, but that's okay, it's an antenna now. The other thing I have noticed that it has a problem with, if I turn on all linear features, it's the slope. It actually puts it down as an LV. So if I turn this off and look at those two slopes right here, and I'm going to just select them both, and look at these line strings. See, it has a feature definition of LV, and these should be slopes. So SLP tab. Okay, so now we have slopes. So what you've noticed now, as I turn everything on, well, let me just turn it on like this, is we're back to where we were. The other thing that needs to be done is we need to fix the zones, and this is pretty easy to do. We can probably best do that from the civil standards by turning, first of all, let me go and turn everything off. And I'll just do the drainage for time's sake, and select it, make them 2 for cells. For any line strings, we'll make those 2. And let me go ahead and do these. Topography. This already 1, so we don't have to change those. And then utilities, we'll just change all the cells to 3, and all the line strings too. So the cells are 3. Now the line strings, we made it the chains feature definition. That's for linear features. We need to change to, we actually need to change the zone to 3. So now what we've got, if we come back and look at our survey tab, we can go into filters, and we can now go by zones. Zone 2. Now notice that the text is not affected. It's not affected because they don't have feature definitions. And I'll turn these all on and move on. We also could go through these, and I won't do them all, but if you notice, some of these need to be spot shots, and all the ground need to be spot shots. So in this case, I would select them all, and under feature definition, I'd change those to spots. Those are for points. Under features, I know the edge of pavement and the crown. I'd use those. The bridge, which actually probably should be in zone 4, it needs to change that. The curb and gutter and catch basin there. What else? The retaining wall and the slopes. So all of this, once selected, these all need to go to Breaklines. And of course, and the building too, didn't include it. This break line for line strings, we want to make them break lines, etc. So we would at this point just about be ready to create a DTM. Okay. So I won't go through all that, but it's the same process as I did in the last webinar. So we've looked at and I want to give you a note on labeling. We do have a little bit different on labels this time. So let me turn everything off right here. I want to show you something of these labels. So here's labels for drainage. Okay, text drain label underbar EP. Retention wall, text topo label underbar EP. For the building, text topo. For fiber optics, text sub utility labels. You see, so we actually have, at this point, we have labels for each of the categories. So if everything's turned on and I go over to my level display and I pick, say, drainage, for instance, I'm going to have just the drainage, including just the labels for drainage. Okay. So remember, when you're labeling, we have labels now, and you'll find those in your level display. Actually, by number, they are down around the 300. They're the last in. See, 328. We also have a text drain invert elevation here, and a text utility label for above ground utilities. So just note that we have at least 5 new labels, and these can be used to make compliant deliverables. Okay. We only have about 10 minutes, so I'm going to open one more file, and I'm going to make it, let's see, let's go to a completed survey. So right here, this is actually a real project, and I probably have just enough time to do this. So let's talk about deliverables for a minute. Let me, while this is opening up, I want to talk about deliverables. What to deliver to design? Well, that's a good question, because right now it's in the process of being vetted. We would like to deliver, we in surveying would like to deliver just a single file. The SURVRD has everything in it. You can put the alignment in it. You can put all your labeling. You can do all your labeling, pretty much everything you want to. But we also have other platforms that don't work exactly like Bentley. So in the CPCH, or actually the CAD manual now, it allows for all of these. We've got the designer, and also depending on the designer's comfort level with 3D modeling, they may decide they want a drainage file or a topo file or a utilities file in 2D. What about the alignment? The alignment's something they make now, so you probably don't want to make an alignment. The GDTMRD, the terrain model is embedded in the SURVRD. So again, that one's probably not something. If a designer asks you for that, the designer probably doesn't realize how exactly the SURVRD works. But you can always export the terrain model as an XML or a TIN and open up a new file, a 3D GDTMRD file, and import that terrain model and give them a standalone. So that will work. So you want to give the designer what they want, what they have a comfort level with. And like I said, the CAD manual for now allows all of these. In the near future, hopefully, the process will be vetted to the point where we'll be able to discreetly say, here is exactly what you need to give the designer for a 3D modeling. But at this point, design is vetting this whole process. They are looking at it. We've got consultants looking at it, and we have DOT designers looking at it. So the TOPORW, though, that's a little bit different animal. We do need to deliver that. No. So this is a completed survey. This survey is good as it is. It has an alignment in it. If I click on it, I'll let you know something. A little setting here. If I go to, let's see, where is it? It's under workspace preferences, and I pull up preferences and I look at view options, we can change that color to something a little more readable and say okay. We actually did get that question, so I wanted to show you that. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to save out the SURV or SURVRD to something else, maybe a SURVRW. We want to switch to the right-of-way configuration. We want to do a survey redraw. We want to select the TOPORW filter, fence out the TOPORW as a 3D, and then open a 2D TOPORW, and then reference in the 3D version and merge the master, and we will have a compliant TOPORW file. See if I can go through that very quickly. Okay, so I'm going to say File, Save As, and I'll call this SURVRD.dgn 01. How about that? Say Save. Okay. It should be an exact copy in this case. I did not want to switch configuration on my original file. There's reasons for that. One of the reasons is if you do a survey redraw, you may end up unrotating things like signs or any kind of cell rotation you did. So I'm going to switch to the right-of-way configuration, or back to the right-of-way configuration. And make sure I open up my SURVRW. Once I've done this, I'm going to select my existing, I can say standard topo, or I could, in this case, at this point, I actually do have a D2 version of the topo, which is pretty much everything, and I'm going to use that one because the TOPORW now is open in the QC inspector, so just about anything will pass in it. And so I want to select the filter. I want to fence it up, not select it. Let me go back, unselect that. I want to fence it. Okay. And I want to type in fence file, hit enter, create. In this case, this is going to be a 3D file because I'm working from a 3D file here. TOPORW. Before I do this, there's something I didn't do, and I meant to tell you. Notice that these points are still the old points. Okay. If I go and do a survey redraw, and that's what I really need to do, I can either type it in or I can hit the survey redraw right here. It's going to go through and it's going to reread the survey feature definitions, which is essentially your feature table. But there's a right-of-way version called ROW underbar display. And it's going to go through and it's going to reread it, and that's what I was talking about. It will actually unrotate any rotation. So now what we have, if we look, instead of an iron pipe, this is the right-of-way version. You see it actually has the mask. Okay. Okay, now, as I said, we can fence it. That's what I wanted to do, was go ahead and fence it and say fence file. Also note that other cells are not dashed anymore. And I'm going to call this TOPORW3D, so I'll know this is a 3D version of the TOPORW. Save. Okay. And then you have to click on the screen to actually populate it, and then click again and you get rid of the fence. So what I need to do is make a new file, and this is the deliverable, the TOPORW. TOPORW01. This is a 2D file. I'm going to use right here you see a right-of-way 2D seed, and I'm going to save it, and it will actually open up once I do that, and it's just a blank file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference in that 3D TOPORW I just made. Say attach, open, go ahead and reference it in. And if I go to tools, let me make sure I see I still have everything there. And if I go to tools and say merge into master, and then click on the screen, it's going to say you've selected one reference to merge. Is that what you want to do? And yes, I do. And it will merge everything into this file and then get rid of the reference file. I'm going to hit accept, close it up. And if you notice now, what I have is I have a 2D TOPORW. If I do a QC on it, it's going to be 100% compliant. If I look over at the Project Explorer, I still will have a fill book, okay, but it's only going to have the points and chains that I fence filed out. It's not going to have everything. And one other thing I wanted you to note, that the feature definition is now not the survey display, it is the right-of-way display. So you can visualize by drainage, monuments, topography, other than the normal topo. If you want just the old TOPORW stuff, here it is, right here, okay? And if you want utilities, you can look at this. So this is your final TOPORW delivery, and as you see, we've just about run out of time. And I go back. If you have any questions, you can contact me, John Hazlip, and at john.hazlip@dot.state.fl.us. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for coming.